And honestly, what are we doing in the midst of those failures matters more than the failures themselves. Okay? Because as God's growing us in the midst of our failures, those are opportunities for growth in our faith in relation to Him. And failure in relation to Abraham's life was a part of God's plan the entire time. Okay? It was a part of His plan the entire time. So don't just run over that. We've gone through the storyline, so we should know this. But don't just walk over that this act that's happening here didn't happen at the beginning of Abraham's life. It happened in the transitional period of Abraham's life, and it came after a long period in which God is continually growing Abraham to this place. Okay? To this place. Verse 2. He said, "Take now your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I will tell you." The problem that we've got with this story is that we know it too well. Now, trick question. Does Isaac end up becoming a sacrifice on the altar and becoming the ultimate burnt offering sacrifice? Yes or no? Does he end up dying on the sacrifice? No. Well, how do you know that? Did you already read this story? And the answer is yes. Most of us know this story from childhood. But understand that in the story, did Abraham know that Isaac was ultimately not going to be sacrificed? No, he did not know that. Guess what he also didn't know? He didn't know this was necessarily a test from God. See, we're given that information, that this was a test from God, but Abraham in real time doesn't have that information. So in what God is telling him, He's ultimately just saying to him, hey, take your son, your one and only son, the son in whom you love, Isaac, and offer him up as a burnt offering sacrifice. Now, when you look at that, what you've got to see and understand and know is, He doesn't just say, take your son Isaac and go offer him up. He says what? Take your son, take what? Your only son, your son that you love, whose name is Isaac, which means he is the son of promise, and do what with him? Burnt offering, total offering in relation to me. Now again, we don't have the law yet, but here we have a burnt offering that is about to happen as it relates to Abraham. So what do we learn in verse 2? Second point. God tests our love in what we love the most. God tests our love in what we love the most. It'd be like me coming to you saying, what do you love in your life the most? And maybe you have a hard time coming up with that, maybe you don't. Then I would come back at you and say, what is it you're not willing to lose? What is the one thing, John, you got it down. I'm sorry. All that I see, you guys don't understand all that I see. I said, what are you not willing to lose? And he squeezes his wife. Some of you men are behind the game right there. Right? What's the one thing, I could lose everything, but I don't want to lose this one thing. Now think about that. It's a massive, massive call. I want you to look, and I want you to examine your life, and I want you to examine your life as to what it is that you love the most. Honestly, for some people, they wouldn't necessarily say it. It is connected with family, and most of us know that it's supposed to be connected with family, but most of us, what we connect it to the most is actually our finances, because we don't think we're going to lose our family. But take anything material, I'm going to take all of it away. Take anything physical, what is it that you love the most? And I'm going to take that away. What is it that you cling to with your hands so tightly that you say, I can give God, I can give you anything, but not this one thing? And then God comes and he says, that's the one thing I want. Does that scare you a little bit? Because it should. If it doesn't, you haven't thought hard enough about this. Here's sometimes the problem that we have when we walk into church is that we talk about this stuff, and for us, we talk about them like they're arbitrary. It's theory. It's hypothetical. Was this a hypothetical thing for Abraham? No, obviously it wasn't, because as the story unfolds, what does he do? He goes, saddles up his donkey, takes his 2 men, loads up the wood, grabs the fire, takes his son, and takes off. So if you read this story, and for you it's arbitrary. For you, it doesn't penetrate to the point of you saying, 1, what is it on this earth that I love the most? 2, am I willing to give that up if God would ask for it? You're not thinking hard enough about this story. We don't like to think about God in these terms. I mean, we're great, okay, with God being the giver of good and great mighty gifts, which He does. We are good and great with God, blessing us beyond our measure, which He does. We are great with God giving us grace that we don't deserve, which He does. And then if we say, and oh, by the way, what you love the most, your spouse, your child, your finances, your own health, and God is going to require that of you. In fact, God's requiring that of you today. Would you saddle up? Say, okay. Or would you say, whoa, 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 whoa. There's a man in the New Testament who said, in essence, Jesus, what would it take for me just to spend an eternity with you? What would it take for me to spend an eternity in heaven with God? Keep the commandments. Check. Do that. Take your most prized possession, which for you is all of your wealth, and give it away. And he left. How? Really sad. You know why? He had a lot of stuff. That's a big call. There's so many layers to the story, because one could look at Abraham and say, man, how could he even understand God saying this? Because this is like pagan practice. We've never had where God would call Abraham to sacrifice his own son. The reality is, it makes no coherent sense. What he's asking Abraham to do makes no coherent sense. The question a lot of times comes in, did he talk to Sarah, his wife, before he did this? What do you think the answer to that is? Well, that's probably what I would say. I don't know, but my answer would probably be no. Why would it be? Because she would probably look at him like he's crazy, and 2, Sarah can hold her own. She might just done put a whooping stick on him. You know? What do you think you were doing with my boy? You know? I don't know. But it makes no coherent sense. But yet, third day he goes, raises in the morning, he goes, verse 4, third day, raised his eyes, saw a place from the distance. Note verse 5, Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go over there, and we will what? We will worship and return. So, question, then what is worship? They're going to go up on the mountain, sing a good song that really speaks to their heart. What is worship? Yeah, how do you define worship? I'm not saying that it doesn't include our singing praise to God, but you better be careful how and what you sing praise to God in, because it's a pledge of allegiance. See, third point, worship isn't what we speak. It's how we respond when God speaks. Worship at its core is not what we speak, but it's actually how we respond when God speaks. Abraham ultimately is willing to give up what he loves the most. You know why? Because he actually trusts his father. He actually trusts his father. This is an amazing statement because it helps, as the story unfolds, it helps us to sort of understand how Abraham is thinking. Because does Abraham believe that he and the boy, Isaac, are going to return down the mountain? Yes or no? Now, why does he believe that if he also believes that God is going to have him offer up Isaac as a burnt offering? If he truly believes, maybe that's the question. Does Abraham truly believe that God's going to ask him to offer him up as a burnt offering? Yes or no? Why would you say yes? Or does Abraham think that when he gets up on top of the mountain that God is going to have a ram up there and he's not really going to have to sacrifice Isaac? And so when he gets up there, this is just sort of all of a ruse, and he'll get up there, there'll be a ram up there, he'll put the ram on, and then he'll just come back down, him and Isaac, they'll come down happily and married and say, hey, that was a fun game, wasn't it? But we say, and rightfully so, we say that that's not what Abraham was thinking. Abraham was thinking that he actually was going to sacrifice Isaac. Why do we think that? Because we know as the story unfolds, what does Abraham do? Does he get to the place where he's got the wood and he puts it on the fire, he puts it down, and he's fixing to start to get ready to light the fire, and he stacks it all up, and then he looks at Isaac and he says, didn't quite turn out the way I thought it was. There is no sacrifice. Well, let's go down the mountain. No, what does he do? We know the story. I'm probably not just going to go ahead and not read it because we know the story. What's he going to do? He's going to tie him up. And he's going to what? Put him on the altar. And he's going to what? Reach out to grab the knife, which means Abraham is going to do what? He is intent that he is going to sacrifice his son. He's actually going to do it. While at the same time believing that they both are going to come down after having worshiped God. How can he believe that? This guy is, I don't know what you classify him in the medical world, but he's messed up. Because in one sentence, he's saying, we're going to go worship and we're going to come back down. And then as we read the story, they both go up. And as they're both going up, he prepares a sacrifice. He gets it all ready. He goes to grab his son. And as he's going to grab his son, then he gets him, he ties him up, he places him on the altar, and he grabs the knife to kill him, and he's going to kill him. And we have to see in the story that Abraham is actually willing to give up what he truly loves the most. It's an amazing story, though, because we also understand Isaac's not like a 5-year-old here. See, he loads up Isaac, verse 6, took the wood of the burnt offering, laid it on Isaac his son, took in his hand the fire and the knife, so the two of them walked on together. Most say Isaac is probably 15 to 20. That's pretty good estimate, 15 to 20, based on everything that we know. If Isaac is 15 to 20, that means that Abraham is how old? 115 to 120. It's not hard math, even for me. 115 to 120. Now, if I'm a 15-year-old and a 115-year-old comes at me with a rope and is going to put me on the altar, what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to probably, a 15-year-old would say, "Are you crazy?" Right? Probably fight him off. If nothing else, take off running. But here's part of the mystery. What does Isaac do? So Abraham is willing to sacrifice everything that he loves because of his love for the Father and his trust in his Father, his heavenly Father. And Isaac is willing to sacrifice himself because he trusts who? His Father. This is a good family lesson. You guys have heard me say that this covenant's a family matter, and we're going to find out later that it actually is. It's a family matter. Why do we continually say it is imperative? It is absolutely imperative that the children learn how to obey and follow their parents, to honor and live under their parents well. Why is that so paramount? Because we just want to make sure we have obedient kids? How you relate to your parents is how you ultimately will relate to God. It's not a one-to-one, but it's a parent's responsibility to show that. What do we see in Isaac? We see the heart of Isaac is in line with the heart of Abraham. It's why they both, when they come down, will have worshiped. The command is given to Abraham. Abraham follows, but then he calls, in essence, his son to follow, and his son does what? Now, part of me just wants to chalk it up to it like a 15, 20-year-old who ain't got no sense. Okay? And I don't mean this badly, but Isaac ain't the brightest bulb in the room, okay? So we're not going to go into his life, but he's not necessarily the brightest bulb in the room. But here's the kicker. Whenever you're faced with death, you got enough sense to do what? Run, fight, flee, but he doesn't. So Isaac says, "My father," and he said, "Here I am, son. Behold the fire, the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Verse 8, Abraham said, "God will provide." The term there is, God will see to it. God will see to it. Where is the sacrifice for the offering? And in essence, what Abraham says to him is, God will see to it. God will see to it. So the two of them walked. They came to the place where God told them. Abraham built the altar, arranged the wood, He bound his son Isaac, laid him on the altar on top of the wood, and Abraham stretched out his hand. He took the knife to slay his son. It's tied to the third point, but the fourth point is, how do you respond to how God sees fit? Father, where's the sacrifice? It's easy for us to say, well, God will provide. God will see to it. Do we trust, number one, that God will see to it? But then here's the bigger question. When God sees to it in a way that we wouldn't see to it that way, how do we respond then? So when God sees to it, but it's not how we would see to it. In other words, if this was my story, if I'm God and I'm going to call somebody to follow me, not going to take them to the place where they've got to actually bind their kid, put him on the altar, reach out to grab the knife, and actually going to do it. To take them to the place where they're actually going to kill their own kid. But guess what God does? He sees to it and says, that's the way that I'm going to do this. If it was me, I would have said, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get them up on the mountain. We're going to see if they'll make the altar. We'll let them lay the wood down, and then what we'll do is we'll provide a lamb. But God sees to it not that way. How does God see to it? He says, I am not going to show you the lamb, the alternate sacrifice, until I see you ultimately grab the knife and actually be willing to, ready to, going to slay your very most precious thing that you love. This story is so radical. It is absolutely so radical. Because in essence, it would be like me coming to you and saying, take what you fear the most. And then that's what I'm going to have you do. Now some right here will raise their hand and say, yeah, but Tony, if you say to me, take your son and imagine God requiring your son or your daughter or your granddaughter or your grandson, God requiring that of you, and He actually does, and you're telling me now to deal with it. Abraham didn't actually have to do it. In other words, Abraham actually, he came back down the mountain with Isaac. There may be some here who say, I didn't come back down the mountain with my kid. I didn't come back down the mountain with my kid. It's a harsh reality. Something we don't like to think about. In fact, it causes a massive strain in our relationship with God. Don't equate one with the other, though. Here's why I'm saying. God works in some people's lives in which maybe He takes the thing that they love the most, and they have to respond to what? They have to respond to what God has done. It's after the fact. Abraham is having to respond before or after. He's having to respond before, and he's having to do it with his own hands. This is like Jesus when He comes in the New Testament and says, if you love mother, brother, sister, friend, anything more than me, you are not. in essence, says, you had this picture of this dream. You had this ideal in your mind of exactly what was going to happen, the way that it was going to happen. You had this dream that you were going to have that was going to come about, and here's what I want you to do. Kill it. Have a funeral for it, because it's not going to happen that way. Why do you do that, God? Do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? What's the answer? I know what his is, and he showed that to be true, but the question is, what is your answer? I don't think anybody can really raise a hand against Abraham and say, I've got it worse than Abraham, but I can't understand the loss of one that you incredibly love and you don't fully understand it, and you wrestle with it in terms of how God is, what God is doing, and you may come to me and say, Tony, it's just not a one-to-one because sacrifice of Abraham didn't actually happen. But you know what did happen? God did not, the Father did not require Abraham to sacrifice his son, but the Father did require the sacrifice of whose son? His own. And he did it for who? People who did not deserve that act of love. And he did so of total free will, of his own volition, because he desired to. Which means what? Anything that he is requiring you of today to sacrifice, or anything that he has required of you that has been sacrificed, guess what? He knows all about everything there is to know all about that. One individual said, at the beginning of Abraham's journey of faith, he asked him to cut off all of his past. And then, in his climax, if you will, his height of spiritual maturity, he asked Abraham to cut off all of his future. And in both bookends, he says, do you love me? And in both of those bookends, Abraham said what? I do. I do. Sometimes we have to have a funeral before we actually have a true future. It's a hard thing, folks. I'm not trying to make light of this. There are people that you myself included, you had an ideal of what you thought would be. You had an ideal of how you thought that it would go. You had an ideal of your dream of how the future was going to play out. And there are times in which God calls you to have a funeral to that end, while asking you, do you love me more than that dream? Am I worth more to you than that dream? You've left your past. You're okay with the covering of the past. But now, with all of your future, are you willing to give me all of your future? Abraham says, okay. He now reasons from a place of God's promise rather than from the problem. See, Abraham's problem is, I don't understand how that you can say the line is going to come through your seed while at the same time causing me to sacrifice the very seed that you said the line was going to come through. if he reasoned his old way, what would he have done? He would have said, so I'll have to figure this out. So I'll have to figure this out. Obviously there's got to be another way in relation to what you're commanding. That's not what he does. He reasons from the promise and now the power that he has witnessed in his own life and the way in which God has worked, and he says, well, okay then. The writer of Hebrews says that what Abraham in essence reasoned is that God could raise some from the dead. That him killing Isaac and burning him as a burnt offering, that they would both come down because God was able to raise his own from the dead. I wish I was there fully. That's sort of the way all of us, when we come to the end of our lives, that we come to, right? We kind of come to I don't know if you guys know this, but all of us, unless the Lord comes back, we're all going to die. I don't know if you know that or not. They've got apps now that'll tell you when that is. Don't know how accurate they are. Okay? But just in case you're wondering, get the app. Maybe you can get a little heads up on God. But the reality is we're all going to come to a point in which we are going to die. And then the question is, do you believe in the resurrection of the dead? Abraham did. So he stops him and he said, "Put your hand against the lad, do nothing, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, your beloved son, from me." Abraham raised his eyes, looked, and behold, you're going to want to circle that term there, behold. It's a startling statement in his word. So when you see behold, it's meant to startle either the person reading or the person in the passage. Behold, it was not there, and now it is. Startling. A ram caught in the thicket, and Abraham went, took the ram, offered it up as a burnt offering in the place of his son. He called the name of that place, "The Lord will see to it." The Lord will see to it. In essence, I can trust God to see to it. As it is to this day, in the mount of the Lord, He will see to it. He then reaffirms the promise, verse 17, "Indeed, I will greatly bless you and greatly multiply your seed as the stars of the heaven, the sand which is on the seashore. Your seed shall possess the gate of their enemies. In all your seed, all nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you've obeyed my voice." I want to finish this last point. The call to faith isn't a destination we reach, it's a process we go through. Why do I say that? Every time in Scripture, whenever God reaffirms His promise, what comes next? Easy, smooth life, right? Every time God reaffirms His promise to Abraham, pretty much all the rest of His patriarchs, every time He reaffirms His promise, what happens next? I mean, just a smooth life. They're sitting on the beach, hanging out, just waiting for it to happen. No, every time you have the reaffirming of a promise, what happens next is there's a risk to the very promise that God has just made. Which means, what can Abraham, what can we in the story expect? Faith now reaches its pinnacle, and no longer is there a struggle of risk. No longer is there a strain on faith. No, what do we know? Faith is a lifelong process in which we can trust the promise of God when we learn the character and nature of God as He grows us in faith, and when He then requires us of the things that we love the most. Do we love the giver of the gift, or do we love the gift? Abraham loved what? He loved the giver. Now, we have prayer. I want you to listen to the song again. I want you to listen to the song again. is what is being sung in worship. Truly worship for you. Y'all come up while I pray. Father, grateful for your love for us. Grateful for the accounts that you've given us through your word. Father, it's strong medicine. If we truly stop, if we truly hear the word and of what's actually happening here, it's strong medicine for us to weigh out, for us to be able to see within ourselves whether or not this is actually true of us. Father, as we witness what you call your people to be, a people who love you more than the most loved earthly thing that we possess. It may be connected to the very promise you've given us, the promise that you've given us for purpose on this earth, to be a blessing to all those around us, but yet at the same time you call us to give up that very thing, and it may make no sense in our minds how that this is or how this plays out, but yet we witness and say, you're calling us to that. But Father, may this story show more than anything else that you are worthy of our trust. And that above anything that you've given or even promised, we love you more than any gift that you've given. And so, Father, as we just really wrestle with this in our own lives, we pray, Father, that we may come to the conclusion that worship is what you command, we obey, we respond, because you truly are worth the loyal love that we have to give. These things we pray in your Son's holy name. Amen.
If y'all know the words, please join in singing with us, okay? My worth is not in what I own, not in the strength of flesh and bone, but in the costly wounds of love at the cross. My worth is not in skill or name, in win or lose, in pride or shame, but in the blood of Christ that flowed at the cross. I rejoice in my Redeemer, greatest treasure, wellspring of my soul. I will trust in him, no other. My soul is satisfied in him alone. As summer flowers fade and die, fame, youth, and beauty hurry by, but life eternal comes to us at the cross. I will not boast in wealth or might, in human's wisdom fleeting light, but I will boast in knowing Christ at the cross. I rejoice in my Redeemer, greatest treasure, wellspring of my soul. I will trust in him, no other. My soul is satisfied in him alone. Two wonders here that I confess, my worth and my unworthiness, my value fixed, my ransom paid at the cross. I rejoice in my Redeemer, greatest treasure, wellspring of my soul. I will trust in him, no other. My soul is satisfied in him alone. I rejoice in my Redeemer, greatest treasure, wellspring of my soul. I will trust in him, no other. My soul is satisfied in him alone.